Okay. Well, I'm Jon Croft, and this is Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft. We're here to talk about cultural warfare. So today we have Rebecca, of course. We don't have any other guests tonight, although we hoped to for some time there. We did have Prodigal Jess a few weeks ago, and we're hoping to have him in the future. And guess what? We might end up also having some guests in the form of the bosses, the dual bosses, the double bosses of Lore TV coming up soon. I've been in communication with them. Jason Farley and Marcus Pidman. And I think Rebecca's here now. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Oh, hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? You were so excited about the bosses, the dual bosses.
Yes, the dual double bosses from Lore TV. We're all on Substack, so every now and then I get to post on their articles and stuff. And so I was like, I might as well ask them. And so I asked them. And they said, just email us and we'll get on there. So we had to set up some stuff in between then and now. That was like a week ago. I talked to them, and so I had to set up some stuff for our studio, which is I finally got Zoom working in the studio for this purpose. And before I was going to use OBS and stuff like this, and so. It was proving to be a little too complicated because I wanted to do too much at one time. And so I had to move some things around. So here we are. Laura has inspired this subject, as well as many other things, actually, has inspired the subject. I tend to have a smattering of abolitionist in me. So this subject of abolition is something that some Christians talk about because it was a very important thing in the past with slavery, but now it's also very important in the present with other forms of slavery and brutality happening around the world. And so this has also inspired me because one of the greatest movies on the Lore platform is this little short film called The Procedure, and it's about abortion. So if you haven't seen that, you should probably watch it. But it's a very graphic, animated short about abortion. So of course we all want to see that kind of thing, don't we? I mean, you like Hollywood horror films, right? But you don't want to see a graphic abortion that happens in real life? What? Why, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton of sense. Why, you're so brave. You're such a brave person. Look at you. I love to challenge people in their thinking. But yeah, so we have honest to goodness horror films that Christians make, right? Because our horror films are about real life. They're not just about some make-believe thing, right? So we know of things that you should be afraid of, right? That you should really fear, not make-believe things. So these are things we actually deal with. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk about because, truth be told, a lot of complaints against the Christian film industry are very valid complaints, because do we typically make these kinds of hard-hitting films? No, we really don't. Do we typically seek to offend people when we go out and making films? No, absolutely not. In fact, we want to go the quickest, easiest little route. Like we wouldn't want to offend the oldest grandmother in our church. We want to really respect and be as kind as possible and not make art at all. Like why would we want to make art because that could hurt someone's feelings and offend somebody. So instead we make back-patting, kind of nice stories that don't really affect anybody and affect culture. So it doesn't offend anybody. That's what's really important, right? We don't want to offend anybody. That would be unchristian of us, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it, Rebecca? It would be so unchristian of us to offend someone, wouldn't it? I can hear how awkward you feel right now.
The cross, you know, the saved by grace, you know, not by works, is a very offensive topic.
Well, what I find offensive about the cross, and of course I should, because the cross is offensive, right? If you're not offended by the cross, there's something wrong with you. But the reason the cross is offensive is because of our humanity, right? It's because we like to pretend that we have just governments, right? That we think clearly, that we love our neighbor, that we're nice people, and we just kind of brush our sins under the rug, right? Like, oh, that wasn't that bad. It's not a big deal. And then when you see the cross, right? The offensive cross, you realize how offensive our sin is before God. Right? Because this is the most painful form of execution. And it's disgusting that a human being would do that to some other human being. See, it's not just the ugliness, like some kind of symbolic ugliness of sin. No, the sin was the crucifixion of Christ itself. Right? This unjust act against an innocent person who was only trying to help people. He's like Mother Teresa trying to help somebody, right? And we literally would rather have a thief and a criminal be set free, and we crucify him. We don't even just put a bullet in his head or something, which would be very quick, painless to some degree, right? No, we give him the most excruciatingly painful execution known to man, and everybody looks at it. Like, are you proud of yourself for that? You know, so this is the display. This is what God did, is he displayed the perfection of his Son, and then he displayed the depth of human sin when he allowed his Son to be crucified on the cross. He displayed for all of us the depths of human depravity. Right? That's why it's offensive. It's not because God offends us. It's because God had the audacity to show us how offensive we are. Right? He had the audacity to actually speak the truth, which is that mankind are full of disgusting things inside of us. Disgusting things. So he cared about us by telling us the truth, showing us the truth of our own depths of depravity. That was a loving act. So now we have a crucifixion, we have a crucifix on the wall, and an opportunity to realize, I have to remind myself I am not this great person. Like, I'm not this great human being, and there's problems in the world right now that have not been solved, have not been helped by anybody. We're ignoring, possibly even. Right? So, I hate to say it, fellow Christians, this entire episode is for you guys. It's for my fellow believers whom I love dearly. And you've refused to look at a crucifix. Refused. right? And how do I know this? Because the depths of depravity that are in the world right now, and you don't go and make art about it. You don't do it. You refuse to offend some little grandmother in your church or somebody who's needing help, and potentially they could be in darkness. They could be believing it's okay to do these things that are harmful. But because you haven't been like Christ, which is to show them their sin, the depths and the depravity of their sin, by putting it, hanging it up, by putting it above, like the way the cross was lifted up. This is our job as Christian artists, to lift up the disgusting depravity of our culture and of what we're seeing around us, the people who've been left behind, the people who've been abused, the people who've been neglected, people in your neighborhood. You're supposed to be loving your neighbor as yourself. And you can't even be bothered to make some art to help them. Like our churches can't be bothered to offer up a little bit of help to their local artist so someone can be helped. They can't be bothered to do that. So this is not just on Christian artists, and I mean it, this is on you, okay? This is your responsibility. Nobody else can do this. This is something that you have to do. So when I'm talking about this topic, the future of Christian film, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making a change in Western Christian society to say, hey, there's some stuff we could be talking about, and we think we just have to keep it in the church. Don't get this way, don't get that, don't get too uppity, to borrow a phrase that Prodigal Jess used. Oh, I was being too uppity. I was talking about witnessing. God forbid I should do that in the church. Even in the church, there's these people that don't want you to witness. Can you believe that? Do you believe that this person is actually a Christian? I don't. I think that they want to be nice. They think Christians are nice people. And so they want to go to church and have a nice afternoon. Hang out, have a coffee. This is not a cross on the wall. That's not what Christianity is about. Like, you went to the wrong place, lady. We're here to offend people and hopefully hurt their feelings. That's what we want to do. We want to hurt their feelings. I made a tweet today on Twitter, which I probably shouldn't do half the time. But here I am, I'm making a tweet. What did I say? I said, most of the major religions of the world require some form of pain to enter that religion. In Judaism, it's circumcision. This is painful. In Islam, it's circumcision. Right? Sometimes women get circumcised in Islam. For Christianity, is it circumcision? Do we get No, we don't. Actually, do you know how we get circumcised? I don't know why people don't talk about this. They think baptism has replaced circumcision for us. No, this is not true. We're circumcised too. How are we circumcised? In the heart. That's how we're supposed to be circumcised. We're supposed to circumcise the heart. What does that mean? If you're not feeling some pain in your heart when you get saved, maybe mourning for the things you've done wrong, repentance. Because first you've got to circumcise your ears. It also says in the Bible, you circumcise your ears. What does that mean? That's kind of like saying your ears repent. That's kind of like saying you have to be willing to change the way you've been listening. And it's got to hurt. right? This has got to be painful. You have to circumcise your ears, circumcise your heart if you're going to be a Christian. So Christ was talking to the Jews who believed that all they had to do was circumcise their flesh, and that would be enough. And he was saying, guess what, guys? It's always been deeper than that. It's always been about you circumcising your heart. And so if you're not experiencing some pain and uncomfortability when you go out to church, or when you minister to your neighbor, or you minister to your family, you're not doing it right. This has got to be painful. You have to do uncomfortable things for yourself, not just for other people. It's got to be hard for you. And if you're not making a change to where you're growing closer to your Lord through your actions, difficult actions, like, how do you know you're even saved if you're not willing to do something for God? Doesn't it say you show your faith by your actions? So I am squarely talking to you, Western Church. I'm squarely talking to you. Do you think you can just get by and not do anything? I hope not. I hope not. So here I am telling you guys who are supposed to be experienced Christians, you're supposed to have all this culture and civilization behind you, right? Behind you as in you've experienced it. But guess what? You haven't experienced it. You didn't. The people before you did, and they gave you an inheritance, an ability to have that knowledge, to utilize that knowledge and practice it in faith in your life, and you just squandered it. You don't even use it. So no wonder people are losing their faith these days and getting, quote, deconstructed or whatever that is. Ridiculous. So, guys, we're going to be talking about some even more uncomfortable things. All right? We're going to be talking about how Christian film can change and get better and stop being weak sauce, which is what it's been. Like, if you really want to be an artist, don't just point the camera in a certain direction. Think about why you're doing it. Right? Don't just repeat the dialogue on a script. Think about this human being and how they have to go through all these changes and how these changes are affecting their lives. And how you should be involving your own life in the changes of this character. Like, these are life-changing stories. If they're not life-changing, what are you doing? So, okay. Let's get into it. Rebecca,
Yes?
what do you think I'm talking about tonight? Like, what's your impression of what I've said so far?
Well, the title is The Future of Christian Films.
Yes. And so this implies there's something new, right? Something we haven't done, something we need to do, some change we have to make in order to get somewhere, which we are not there now, right? So it's hopefully something better. Actually,
Yes.
that's a requirement. Okay, that was kind of a joke. Not hopefully something better. It's a requirement. It has to be something better. And how are you going to do that? You have to be a little more daring than the people before you, right? And if you're not more daring than the people before you, then you're not going to be offending them. So guess what? You're going to be offending all of them, right? And are you afraid that if you offend them, then they're going to say nasty words against you? Is this what you're afraid of? Oh, my sweet summer child. get ready. Get ready to laugh when they say offensive things, and laugh with joy, not just in some kind of disturbed mockery. No, laugh with joy. Because, why? Because that guy up on the cross is proud of you. He's proud of you. Right? He says, if you follow me, you will likewise be hated, like I was.
Yeah.
And if you're not, well, maybe you missed the mark somewhere, because you're not following me. Right? And this goes into what I was saying about offending people, doesn't it? Do you believe that everybody in your church is a Christian? Don't be so naive. Please. There are people who probably work for the church who actually are not believers. They're just very acceptable, attractive, nice people. We're very good at looking the part. Really good at it. But are they working to offend people? You know, upset people's feelings? Probably not. So I would doubt their sincerity if they aren't willing to do that. So all of us need to be willing to do that for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of Christ. So I'm not saying we shouldn't be nice people or try to love people, but the kind of radical love that Christ showed us isn't just being kind and nice to people. No. It's saying hard things that people need to hear, doing hard things to sacrifice for others so they can have life, right? So they can be protected and so they can have the opportunity to worship God. So, like you. So, okay, let's get into it, because this is, even though I've come out of the gate with a lot of ferocity to say that you guys need to get it together, like, and realize your job is to offend people, and so be happy when people are offended at you and angry at you and mock you. Be happy about that. But yes, this is going to be a very technical episode because I want to talk about literally how the church and how Christian filmmakers and Christian artists can make great stuff into the future and form a new film movement if they want to. I hear a lot of people, whenever they talk about faith-based film, they talk about stuff like faith-based. What does that even mean? Is that a genre? Like, that's not a genre. You can't call a film Christian. People are Christian. They have all these technical discussions about the definition of Christian film. What a waste of energy. Guys, if you're a Christian and you want to work, you want the Lord to work through your life, you want to answer some questions about life, because you're an artist, right? You have deep, like, inner struggles with concepts, right? You want to put those struggles out on some canvas. Put some struggles out on celluloid, right? If you're dealing with stuff and you don't have all the answers for everything, that doesn't mean your art is not Christian. That's ridiculous. So if you're not saying the most acceptable Christian message in your film, this doesn't mean your film isn't Christian. And it doesn't mean you're not a Christian either. That's ridiculous. That's the point, is that you are a Christian. You're an honest, authentic person, because you have to be if you're a Christian. And that means you're going to have real, honest things to say about life through your art. So if you're not doing that, I would have a problem with that. That's why I have a lot of issues with faith-based film, is that often it doesn't seem very authentic to me. So let's get past a lot of these discussions of, like, defining Christian film. You're a Christian, you're an artist, you want to make film, right? And if you're making authentic film, then the subjects, the themes, the plot, the story, the characters, all these things are going to have embedded in it and impregnated in it the gospel message in some way, right? Because this is the transformative truth that's transformed us, right? So this is how you look at the world as a Christian. Is you Christ has illuminated, has taken away the scales from your eyes about how the world's constructed. And so now you're able to see new things about life that you really didn't see before. And it's illuminated for you in a way, right? So these are sincere questions that you really want to ask through your art, and you should be doing that, right? So a lot of art just has to do with authentic conversations. Like when you have a script, right? What do you do with it? You just immediately make it into a film? No. You're supposed to have conversations with good scriptwriters about it. You're supposed to have conversations with your friends about it. Let them read your script, right? And so when they do that, they ask questions. They're like, what does this mean? Why did this happen in the plot, right? So you get to talk about the transformative nature of the story you're trying to tell to them. And then what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to learn something from all of this as a writer, as a filmmaker. And you're supposed to bring out those themes even more as you talk to the experts on how to make this film interesting. And if you're not doing that, well, then your themes are going to really suffer. And the quality of your script writing is going to suffer. And often you'll just miss obvious truths if you don't have someone giving you some feedback. So that's rule number one to me. You have to be authentic, and you have to work at making your scripts really good. And the only way to do that is to talk not just to other filmmakers, screenwriters about your work, but to other filmmakers, screenwriters who are Christians about your work. And you want people who have experience with doing this, right? And if you're doing that, then they're giving you feedback. You're able to then refine something that's better, right? So this is the script process. But that's just the first part of that, because I find that sincerity in the filmmaking community is very hard to come by. Just authenticity and sincerity. People are thinking about making money. So let's get this right out of the way, right? Instead of thinking about authenticity, they're thinking about making money and the industry. Well, you need to dispense with this, because your art is going to be really lame if you do that. It's not going to challenge anyone. It's not going to be much different than Hollywood's if you are concerned about making money. So that's been one of the major problems even I had earlier as a filmmaker, is that I was just trying to provide product for Hollywood at AFM as a regular filmmaker. I was not working in faith-based film. And I barely am now. I'm just starting working in this right now. But what I saw was the state of my own heart as I changed my product to suit the marketplace, and realizing this is not the same kind of story that I really would have preferred to tell, because I believe that art is supposed to transform, change people, and help people and illuminate truths about life, really. And so when I'm changing my script to suit some marketplace, right? Well, this is probably not going to be as vital. And it isn't, I'm not even saying that specifically I was doing something that was revealing that. It was more like it was changing the way I was thinking. And if it was changing the way I was thinking, then obviously what I was going to be putting out was not of the same kind of, it didn't have the same motivation or mission any longer. And so I'd be experiencing mission creep. And so I mean, honest to goodness, I really, at that point, wasn't trying to make God-pleasing films. I really wasn't. I was trying to make films just that somebody would buy. You know? So when that's your objective, you know, like let's say you're just trying to sell something in Hollywood. Well, who are you trying to sell it to? If you're trying to sell it to just a secular distributor, like Netflix or somebody, obviously you're not going to be thinking about, is your story redemptive or Christian in some way? You're going to be thinking about, well, what are they willing to buy, right? What do they want? What are they willing to give you for that? And even if you're working with a faith-based distributor, you start thinking about what does that genre contain in it. It's not about the story you wanted to tell or the kind of stories that affect you as a Christian or that illuminate the truths about life that you want to talk about as a Christian. No, it's about the kind of elements that you think that this distributor wants from you. Right? So I met great people at AFM, and some really nice people and some really terrible people, you know, people who wouldn't give me the time of day. And what I wanted, at least initially, was more of like relationships, authentic relationships with people. Like where I could just talk to a distributor and be like, you know, honest to goodness, what are you looking for? Like what kind of film do you have a shortage of right now? I want to get as technical as possible. Like what specific kind of film do you, because here's what I had. And a lot of distributors, I didn't even get to talk to them about this. Because I guess it is a little technical, but it's like, what I had was directors who I've worked with, directors who I haven't worked with, but I'm in talks with, in where I live, in Tampa Bay area. Directors who I know who are just looking to get product out. And so there are numerous directors. There are like 20 directors, right? And, you know, some of them are really good, some of them are medium, some of them are not as good. But they could, even the directors that aren't as good, can make genre work that's sellable. It's, you know, it could even be profitable. So I have maybe 20 directors, and if I find out what the market wants, and I can specifically talk to them about what they want. Okay, they want this kind of antagonist. They want this kind of villain. They want this kind of plot. This is specifically what they're looking for. I can literally make that for you. I could just tell this director, hey, that script that you wrote, let's modify it a little bit. Right? Because it's mostly what they already want. Let's change this character around. And then I will provide this for you. I'm not saying that there's any obligation you have to buy at all as a distributor. You just give me a clue on what you want. Because this is the way I think. I think if this one distributor who knows what they're talking about knows what they want and can tell me, even if they don't buy it, there's going to be another distributor who probably will. Because they're doing research on the same marketplace. It's the same marketplace. So if one distributor sees this need, the others are going to probably very likely see the same need. They might not like your style or whatever. That's fine. They might not be able to negotiate with you as well as some other distributor. But so that was actually what I was bringing to the table at AFM. And a lot of them didn't even know I had that in my back pocket. I walked out of meetings because I was like, what do you want? And they were not interested in telling me what they wanted. So I just like, fine, I'll leave. Like, why would I bother? Like, I can give you the exact film you want in a year if you ask for it. See, they just didn't know that they could ask for that. That's why I told them they could ask for it. And they probably just didn't believe me. So, I had this as an advantage, but then I realized, wait a second, I continue to modify what I want to make for someone else. Eventually, where's my substance as a creator? It's just about money. It's just about whatever the market says. Aren't I just going to keep doing that? No matter what? So you get on that treadmill, right? You get on that little hamster wheel. And if you get on that hamster wheel, you might not be able to get off of that thing. And that was a realization I eventually came to, which was, well, if I actually do end up in this deal, what is that going to be next time when they're like, give me this, and I can't give that to them? What's that going to be like? Or if I can't perform, when I claim I can do that. I'm not saying that this would ruin our relationship, but it's kind of like, what am I continually working towards? What am I busting my butt over here, right? Trying to appease somebody. And so you come to a realization eventually, and this is what eventually I came to, was that artists create from passion. They've already got something that they want to do, and I find that the sincerest, most talented artists make what they make, no matter what you have to say about it. They don't care. They don't care if the market doesn't want that. They just create it because of passion, because of this passionate fire of artistic talent that they have. That's where it comes from. And you really just can't turn your nose up at that as a distributor or a producer necessarily. When you find that kind of talent, you have to acknowledge it. I mean, obviously, it should be an authentic talent, right? It can't just be somebody with an ego or something who's like, I know exactly the best thing for this marketplace, and they come in and they just create junk, So if you can create great material, it shouldn't be about, being precious about the themes or the story or the characters or whatever. No, it should be about letting that talent shine. And yes, you do hope there's a market for this talented person, but there is something about, as a producer or distributor, being able to identify real talent. And so even if your market's like, no, this is not something we need, there are outliers where you'd be surprised that this was not what the market said it wanted. But then once this great, talented work came down the pike, you were like, oh, wow, this is worthy. This is a worthy purchase to make, and to put your eggs in that basket because this is a worthy talent. So first of all, that was the first realization I made. I was like reminded of, oh yeah, true talent is undeniable, right? So don't water down that with just a bunch of market demands. That's number one. Number two, as a Christian, I was reminded also by the Lord, well, do you think that you can't get money from the Lord if the Lord wants you to do this and such, makes this film, and your concern is money in order to make this film? Like, oh, I need this certain amount of money. Is God really in this project? Is he really telling you to make this? If he's telling you to make this, don't be faithless about it. Understand that he will back it up, right? With facts, with money, with support, with these things. You just have to do what you have to do your job, bring your talent to the table, right? And so he gives you something to do. You just take that and go with it. Don't worry about the rest of it. These things will take care of themselves in time. It might be a few years before you get funding or whatever you need financially. But there's so many stories like this where directors will be like, well, we only had this to make this happen. We only had these resources, so we just used those. And then later on, they got more resources and they could finish the film properly. And if they hadn't done what they had to do in the early stages where they had no resources, if they hadn't done that faithfully, they wouldn't have got to the later stage where they could get all those resources that they need and make it happen and make it work. So you have to just continue to press forward faithfully, right, with what you have, and stop kind of worrying about all these details, right? You have to be faithful enough with what the Lord's given you, because he's not an idiot. He didn't go like, oh, I'm not going to give you any stuff to do this, but I want you to do it. No, like, don't expect that this is all on you and it's going to be some disaster if you go forward and nobody supports you. No, something will happen. Like, have enough faith to just, obviously we keep praying about these things and we keep working towards them, but don't let money or resources be the reason that you just don't work on it. Like, even if you're just going over the script for 2 years and getting the best script imaginable, that if you put your best foot forward and try to work with people, try to get the best people to work with you, and maybe you're a screenwriter, maybe you don't have a lot of resources, keep working with other people, keep working with other screenwriters, try to find directors, try to find producers, right? Try to learn whatever you can. If you really believe in this project, keep pressing it forward, right? Don't give up on this. So that's the second thing I learned is don't let these little details, stop you, which I had been doing for a few years. I'd been, very much like, well, I'm learning to be a producer. I have to do this to be a producer and be diligent as a producer. And that means I have to learn all the ways of getting funding and all these things. And most of the time that wasn't happening. Projects, scripts weren't connecting with funds. There was a lot of disconnect in that way. And either it was the wrong director or the wrong script or the wrong funding, and these things just weren't connecting. So I had a lot of, second thoughts about my career choice at that point. So then it's kind of like the fundamentals, right? As an artist, you don't go out so far out on a limb to where you're like forgetting the fundamentals of why you're there. So I was even forgetting the fundamentals as a Christian artist. I was like, I'm just going to make whatever I can make, right? And now we're seeing the state of Hollywood. We're seeing the state of our culture and our society. And I'm realizing part of this problem is people like me, right? Who I'm not even seeing the needs out in our community. I'm not even connected with the needs in our community and trying to provide inspiration for people who need it. So this brings me to my next really this is probably the biggest point of this episode, is that in order for Christians to do something new and to make a future film movement, we have to sink down deep on who we are as artists. And as I was saying just a second ago, there in your community, right, there are real needs. In the first century church, right, if you read it, like if you're around like Christians who are like socialist people, which is not a very Christian belief system, by the way, but they will lie to you and say things like, oh, the church all shared everything, and they were like, in the sense that they believed that this was some sort of socialist utopia. This is just not true. Socialism is a governmental system. These are communities and families and individuals who are like offering help. That's not socialism. But my point is that in the first century, right, they had a real community, as in they're asking people, what are your needs? What are your authentic needs, right? We know that authenticity was very important because why? Because there were people giving money to the church, and a couple, there's a story in Acts, a couple gives falsely, right? As in, they're, do you remember the story, honey? Was it Aquila or somebody?
Yeah, I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but yeah, they
falsified something.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. They joined in with everyone else in selling everything that they had to give to the church, but then they held some money back, and then when they were asked about it,
they lied.
They just fell over dead.
Well, they lied, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I believe they showed up saying, "This is it. This is all the money," and then they had actually been holding some back, and so I think it's Peter who calls them out on their lie.
Yeah, and to me, like one thing people miss about this is they think that, oh, they were supposed to give everything and they didn't give everything and that was wrong. That's not the point at all. Like, nobody's asking Christians to give all of their goods to the church. We're not doing that. What they were doing was engaging in what you could call a virtue signal. Today, the term would be a virtue signal. That virtue signal is in other words, there's a popular thing to do. Let's be like the popular kids, right? And somebody's getting, let's say somebody's getting some favor in that community. Somebody's like getting a lot of back pats. Wow, what a good guy you are. You gave all your money to the poor. Wow, that's so amazing. Like, we love you. You're such a great guy, right? And now the church supports them, right? Because this person isn't rich and wealthy and stuff anymore, right? So they need actually to be supported by the church. And so the church is supporting and rallying around these people who are so giving. Well, they want to get in on that action. That's that's going on in the community. They want to get in that action and be one of those wonderful heroes of the church who are giving. Well, all they have to do is claim that they gave everything. They don't have to give everything. They can keep things secret back there. Keep things private. They don't have to actually give all their money to because why? Because they actually do care about money. They actually do care about their goods and their things. But they also want some of that sweet, sweet social virtue. Right? So what Peter, if it was Peter, I don't remember if it was Peter, but if it was Peter, I think he said something like, did you think you could deceive the Holy Spirit?
Yeah.
I think he said that. And so the idea here is that when you're in a real community with people, you know the needs, you participate in actually trying to solve a community's problems. And authenticity is very important here. Truly working to help a community's needs, right? So what we're seeing today is a different kind of community, a different kind of society and culture than what was in the first century, right? They have, they have poverty, they have all kinds of, needs in the church. Acts says that all their needs were met, right? As people gave into the church. They weren't just giving like a tithe, right? No, people were giving to solve a problem. In other words, they had lists of needs, and they had people to come and meet those needs. This wasn't just some kind of free-for-all. It wasn't supposed to be that way. Right? So if there's no needs that month, are they going to be taking a collection? No, why would they? They're just here to meet the needs that they find in their community. And if these are inauthentic needs, what's that going to mean? You're going to get punished because those two people who lied, they literally died right there. Bam, dead. They hauled them out. Right? So one of them died first, and then the other one was like, huh? Like, yep, you're going to go out with them too. There you go. Sorry. That was not just the disciples going, these people should die. No, that was the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit killed him right there. Bam. I'm going to make an executive decision here. Right? So my point in that isn't to put fear in you. It's so you understand that authenticity as it comes to the needs in the church really matters. Authenticity really matters. So giving a tithe or whatever in your church is nice, but you know what's even better? Actually meeting actual physical needs that you see in your community. When you see someone in your community has needs, here's why I emphasize this, right? As an artist, a Christian artist. If you see real authentic needs in your church or your community as a Christian artist, you need to go to there and you need to start making art about this. Okay? Because in making art about this, you are providing for physical needs. You literally are providing for physical needs by making films about this subject. Why? You're raising awareness, not just to your local community. They already know about this. No, you're raising awareness to the entire consciousness of the church to these kinds of needs. Right? This is not that complicated, although some people don't put these things together sometimes. Two and two together. Because they think, well, how can I, if there's a homeless guy, and he's like, well, how can I use a film to solve my problem? No. You misunderstand. Right? Raising awareness is about connecting you to the person who actually does have the ability to help you. And so somebody sees your film and then they do give, right? They do provide those resources that you need. And so why am I saying this? This is really a need that we have in the church. We need artists, filmmakers who really care about their communities, who want to help provide for needs in their community. And they need to just start going out there and bring their camera and filming stuff. And hearing, right, because a lot of the filming of stuff isn't just about making a documentary. It's about gathering information and building inspiration. You're building inspiration. Right, and so this inspiration is possibly about writing a script, which is a narrative that isn't even the actual people. It's not even just a documentary, right? It's about creating authentic characters for stories. And so lots of times narrative characters are based on real people that you meet, that you know. And so you meet these people, you know these people. Now you can write a good character for a script because you're inspired by them. You are writing narrative stories based on your life, your lived-in experience about life. Well, if you're not going out where the problems are, how are you going to get these interesting stories and meet these interesting people and make these stories kind of form with some kind of some veracity to it, some kind of authentic realism to it? You got to live some of that stuff. So that's why I say bring your camera, right? But here's the thing I wanted to get at, though, more specifically. What do we have now? We had last summer a breakout film as a faith-based film that Hollywood hated, which is really good. That is a success. It's not even about just the fact that they made millions of dollars making this film and putting it out there. It's that they got to offend Hollywood, and you want to do that. Like, if you can do that, you're doing really good, right? Because why? I just spent like the first 15 minutes of this episode talking about why you need to be offending the right people. Okay? Because you want to please your Lord. That's why. So, be assured that when you're offending the right people, you're pleasing God. So you want to do that. So think about the offense of the cross, right? So what is this film I'm talking about? Well, if you haven't figured it out by now, okay, I understand. But it's The Sound of Freedom. The Sound of Freedom was made in a Hollywood sort of way, right? There were some resources there, which was good, which gave it some polish, right? Jim Caviezel. But guess what? This faith-based film was unlike most any other faith-based film we've seen. Not only was it like a thriller / action / drama, which you don't really see quite often in faith-based film, it's also about a very prescient, timely, relevant subject, which is human trafficking. And this is the primary thing I'm getting at here, folks. Because nobody's making big films in Hollywood about human trafficking. What does that mean? There's a demand for it. There's a demand to see on the big screen relevant social needs talked about that Hollywood will not talk about. There's a pent-up, built-up, just built-in need in society because these things in society affect people. Right? There are people who've lost a daughter or son to human trafficking. They exist. They're real people. I met some of them. Right? And as you study things like human trafficking, you get to see just how prevalent something like human trafficking can be when you're traveling in certain circles. But it can actually affect people from any demographic. You know, it's far more widespread than we like to think. And why is this? Because today's parents put a phone in their child's hands and walk away. That's what they do. They say, here's your phone. I have all kinds of excuses in my head why you need this phone. First of all, you're bothering me about it, like you really want one, so I'm just going to give it to you because I am that weak as a human being. If someone just asks me for something and they just keep bothering me, I'm just going to give it to you because I'm just so pathetically weak. I know I'm coming down on you. All right? But understand that this is a real problem now in society because of so many parents who are just out to lunch somewhere, right? Like they're literally out to lunch somewhere and their kid is like at home with an iPad or something. And what are they going to be doing, right? They're going to be watching terrible content. They're going to be on social media. They're going to be talking to other boys and girls of their age or people that they think are of their age. And they're going to be talking about nonsense on social media or something, right? That's all they have to do for human trafficking to be knocking on their door. That's all they have to do. Just do that a few days even, a few weeks. It doesn't take that long even. You know why? Because the film told us why. The film told us why. It said has surpassed the drug trade, right? As it comes to how much money these people make. And where they're making money, they've got people working on it. They're paying salaries of people. They're paying people to human traffic your child down the street. Someone's being paid as a job to do that. You know that they were paid for that for drugs 10 years ago. Well, guess what they're being paid for now? To human traffic your child. Why? Because they'll make more money. This is not that complicated. Okay? Just put two and two together, right? So how do we all know this now? Because I actually knew about human trafficking a little bit before seeing this film, but the film illuminated even more, right? Even for me, because I had seen a film about human trafficking that had not been sold to anybody. It was undistributed, unacquired property in LA at AFM, and I saw the film and I was like, this is like a horror film. That's what I told the director. I was like, this is like a horror film, and I don't think anybody in Hollywood will buy it. Because it's about human. It was literally made from a real scenario. Like, I shouldn't say scenario. No, it was a real experience a woman had. And she worked with someone to write the script after she was free again. And I mean, it was literally like a horror film. I was so disturbed that this could happen to someone in the United States. I was like, is this real? And yeah, it kind of blew my socks off as it comes to like raising my awareness. But I didn't at the time even know it was that prevalent. I just knew it existed and it was a real problem. People had suffered through it, right? I didn't know. And then what's even worse is it didn't even talk about all of the social media vulnerabilities that children have to it. That film didn't even tackle that. It mostly just tackled the fact that there could be like literal slaves in our country and you wouldn't know it. They could be right down the street. That was what the film I saw at AFM, that was basically what it was about. And I was like, what the? That's crazy. Right? Guys, if you believe in God, you believe in justice, you believe in love, you believe in kindness, how is it that these stories don't impact you? I mean, come on, guys. Like, this is why I brought up abolition. Okay? Abolitionists in the 1800s were a small minority of the population in the United States. Very small minority. Who believed that it was just plain immoral, plain wrong. Slavery was just wrong. Did they just shut up and go away? Because they're just a small percentage of the population. Did they go, oh, it's pointless, it's useless, we should just give up on this mission, nobody's going to see the relevance of it? Statistically speaking, factually speaking, that would make sense to just give up. We're literally talking like 1% of the population. Like nobody cares. Slavery. Nobody cares. I'm sorry, if you're in the northern United States, you're treated like you're some kind of amazing, wonderful person. They were not then. They tolerated it. Many people in the North tolerated slavery. Right? So the UK had a different philosophy about abolition. They were a little bit different. It's not that their population was more abolitionist necessarily. They were also a small part of the population who were against slavery and for the complete abolition of slavery. So why did they succeed in banning slavery after like 20 years of fighting in Parliament when we had to go through a civil war and 500,000 people had to die? Why did that happen? Why did we have to go to war over slavery and they didn't have to do that? Why is that? The reason is very simple. Their abolitionist movement believed in changing the culture. They believed in the mission to change the culture and raise the awareness of slavery. They had a picture that said, "Am I not a man and a brother?" This picture of this African slave praying to God And it said underneath him, am I not a man and a brother? And you know what that was doing? You know what that was saying? That was saying, according to scriptures that you read, oh Christian English man, you read the scriptures, don't you? That said, I am a human being and you cannot do that to me. According to scripture. That's what that meant. Right? Because the Bible in the Old Testament said you can't do that. And it had harsh punishments for people who mistreated slaves as well. And chattel slavery at the time was all doing that. All breaking those rules. So their abolitionist movement was more effective than ours. That's my point. And why is that? Because they had the bravery to speak up socially and change the awareness of what makes this a human being. What makes this black man a human being? Why is he human just like me? Because scripture tells us that's why. And are you a Christian? Why is it you call yourself a Christian and then you just do whatever? You can't do that. You have to have a conscience. Right? And so that movie, I've talked about this in the past, but that movie, Amazing Grace, is about a man who was a slave trader and his conscience was pricked. And he said, I cannot do this anymore. God has convicted me and made me realize this is wrong. And he wrote a song, Amazing Grace. Did we just forget about it and just say, oh, it's a good song, whatever, who cares? Like we do in America today? Oh, it's just another song of many songs. Who cares? Imagine if they had done that in the UK. Imagine if they had just ignored it. Just another song. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean anything to me. I don't care. I'm not saying that those people didn't exist. They still, in the majority, existed. But because this small percentage of the UK population who were evangelicals, mind you, this is why I'm a proud evangelical, by the way. These evangelicals said, you know what, we have a duty to affect the culture and bring justice into the world. We have a responsibility to do that in our society, especially in a democracy where we have a voice. If you were in a kingdom and you had no voice, okay, I can understand maybe not saying much. What's the point anyway? But when you do, and you're a Christian, and so your voice is based on the principles in the Word of God, isn't that going to have some weight? Especially when there's so many other Christians out there who also read the same Word of God. They know what am I not a man and a brother means. There's some, you can resonate with someone on this truth, right? You can find some common ground here. These evangelicals pressed this forward, and it took them 20 years, and they did it. And you don't think it was worth fighting for 20 years? Shame on you. Are you serious? Think of all the people who died on the slave ships that you didn't see. That doesn't matter to you? Okay, how about those children in the womb that you don't see? You don't think that matters? So now we're bringing it to where we are now. Right now we have an abolitionist movement today who's not about slavery, who's about abortion. Guys, these are real issues that affect people. And guess what? Human trafficking is an important issue to talk about because it's a very complicated issue. And so is abortion. And there's real people who are suffering right now with these things, with these subjects. But you're going to say, oh, this film won't make any money. I mean, except for Sound of Freedom. Except for these other films that are starting to make a difference. Except for those. So, fellow Christian, you're in the church. You have an artist who wants to do something. You know? And you don't understand that if you show this film to hundreds of people, when they couldn't do this in the UK, they didn't have screens and films. They had to do it in person. And they still made an enormous difference and ended slavery. But you can't do that today? Really? We have the internet. We have theaters. We have radio. We have all kinds of... You could even just by writing a book is something. I mean, at least they had that then. But, come on, people. You can't put your pen to paper and try to affect something in society. Don't be so cynical. Right? And it doesn't have to be one of these big issues I'm talking about. These big issues don't have to be the ones that are affecting you. And have to be the things that have inspired you to go out and do something. So what's God telling you to write about? And to talk about? And to film about? Right? Can you collaborate with someone at your church and say, here's what I want to do. I want to make this. And I can understand if you want to go as big as All Get Out and you want to make a blockbuster film, nobody's going to give you money for that. Okay? Understand, that's just not how Hollywood works. People aren't just going to throw money at you. Okay? So are you just going to give up then because you want to go as big as you want? No, please don't do that. That's ridiculous. Go small. Okay? How does Angel Studios get their films made? How do people get their films made in Hollywood? It's almost always the same. The only difference between Angel and Hollywood is Angel gets the funding from crowdfunding, and Hollywood gets it from investors. And the crowdfunding people are fans that have a voice. They want to say, I like this kind of film. I like your kind of film. Your kind of film speaks to me. And so I'm going to give money to your film. But if Hollywood weighs in and they've got all the investment funds, well, what they say goes. Right? Because there's just a few investors. And they have this Hollywood experience they can use to say, I have more experience doing this than you do. Sorry, but we're going to take over from here, right? Our voice is more weighty than yours, oh director, who's only made 2 films or whatever, right? What are you going to do then? You lost your film. You have no creative control over your film. But with crowdfunding, you do. So you get to at least have a voice. You get to say, I'm going to make this. You get maybe a few thousand investors. They give $100 each. Now you can make it, right? But it all starts the same way. Starts with the grain, the seed of an idea. A short movie. That's how it starts. You could make a short movie for just a few $1,000s. Okay? So please do not give me these excuses like, oh, I can't do this. Oh, I can't. Oh, it's so hard. You're boring me, okay? No, you can do a lot of things if you start small, right? And so you start small. What does that mean? You have a script. Your script generally it's a page per minute when you're making a film. That's generally what you get, about a page per minute. So you want a 5-minute short, get 5 pages, right? If you're doing a lot of dialogue, you're going to have a few more pages, probably. Action is less pages, dialogue is more pages. So start small. And if you're doing this with Angel Studios, it's called a torch. So it's like a proof of concept. This small short it's like a synecdoche, right, of a larger idea. So you have a small idea, you make a small thing, and this represents a feature that you want to make later. You've got the same concepts, the same world building, the same basic characters, and you kind of know what you're getting, right? So what happens? You send that through, you get votes through the Angel Guild, and then you have to go through rounds of funding. And then if you do, and that might even take a year or two to go through rounds of funding. This is no different than Hollywood, friends. It's not like you should look at Angel Studios and turn your nose up and be like, but this might take a few years of... Yeah, no difference in Hollywood. In fact, there's people who have been in development hell, they call it, in Hollywood for 5, 6, 7 years. So I don't want to hear any complaining about Angel Studios. Oh, they're so different. No, stop complaining. Understand that this is always what happens with crowdfunding, is you have to raise awareness of your project, right? And then find a fan base who believes in your project. You put your best foot forward with your short. Say, this is the vision. This is what I'm trying to do. And now you know I can make a film. I'm not just blowing smoke at you, right? Here's my film. Good or bad, take it or leave it, right? And maybe even make a better short. You start out making an okay short, not so good. Fine, make it better. This is not rocket science, friends. There's plenty of filmmakers who started this way. They've made short film after short film after short film. Eventually they get far better as a filmmaker. And then somebody goes, you know what? I'm going to take the plunge. I'm going to help fund your feature. Because it's good enough to believe in. Right? And so now you have something bigger. And you're able to snowball and make something greater from this. Right? This is always how these projects work. And the same thing is happening to me with writing. By the way, I'm learning that writing is really not much different. You're starting small with this seed of an idea. You want to turn into something bigger. Well, you just have to keep snowballing it, right? And keep getting better at it. So what are we talking about here with the future of Christian film? We're talking about not the same kind of pictures we've been making. We're talking about the films, like I was just mentioning, like Sound of Freedom. Why Sound of Freedom? Because this is actually discussing the real problems in our society. Not just some theoretical person who had to go through some redemptive tale like in a faith-based film like you've seen a million times. No. These are real issues that are affecting real children, real families. You might even get inspired to do something about it. And what are we seeing now since a year ago? We've seen lots of discussions from Tim Ballard and Jim Caviezel. We've seen even Donald Trump get involved with trying to do something with it. We've seen real experts talk about human trafficking, why it's such a problem in our society. You know what? 2 weeks ago at my church, they talked about Rafa International, a human trafficking organization. Do you think they would be in our church if that film had never been in theaters? No, they wouldn't. This is a year later. So if you don't think that film made a difference in society, what are you smoking, friends? It's nuts. Like, you don't think this matters? So, and again, I'm not just talking about human trafficking. I'm talking about so many other issues in our society that affect all of us, right? I have a friend who was talking to me 2 weeks ago on this show, Prodigal Jess, and he was talking about how the problem with the church is they don't talk about politics enough, because since the church, right, has bowed out of politics, it's no longer in the pulpit, what's happened? Politics has become toxic, right? So this is because we weren't involved. And I'm here to tell you, it's not so much about politics. It's about the fact that we're just not involved, period, in the culture, right? Period. We don't even know how to make films, right? So, I'm sorry, but the issue is not politics. The issue is that we have receded from culture, and we've given the reins up to a bunch of other fuddy-duddies who think they know better than you. They're training your children at school what to think, and you're not even paying attention, right? You're trying to get your retirement all set. So this is exactly why human trafficking is what it is. Sometimes these problems morph based upon what society is doing. It's ignoring their children. So therefore, what happens? They put a cell phone in their children's hand and they walk away and they go have lunch. Right? So these eye devices, or what I want to call them, what's going to happen? Your children are all by themselves after school. There's nobody there to manage them. And all they have is a cell phone or an iPad or whatever. Now you've got a growing industry in human trafficking because of that. So, often the crime comes from this, right? The issue comes from where we're not looking, where we're not paying attention. So we need to start paying attention, folks. We need to start paying attention that somebody has taken over the education of your children. Somebody's taken over academics. Someone's taken over government. Someone's taken over this. Someone's taken over Hollywood. And we're just sitting in the back seat, complaining. This is never how it was supposed to be, friends. So, again, the difference between what happened in the Civil War and what happened in the UK with abolition is a whole world of difference. And the reason is because the abolition movement in the UK believed they could do something about it. And they worked in the arts, in the culture, to change minds and change hearts. And we're just not doing that. So that's the difference, folks. The difference is we're not believing we can make a difference by involving ourselves in the culture. And that is really sad. That's a sad realization to come to. When we believe in so many other things, we believe things can get changed in politics. We believe things can get changed in manufacturing. We believe things can get changed in lots of ways in society. So why not the culture? Right? And here's the reason I think it is that we've been lied to and told that we can't get involved in the culture anymore. They call it the culture war. And they want to politicize everything. And so what are they convincing you of? They're trying to brainwash you into believing that you can't be involved in the culture. You don't belong there. So you should just get out, right? What was the sign? No coloreds allowed. We don't want you here. We're not going to serve your kind. So, and you believe it. Why do you believe it? Stop believing it. You can make films. You can make stuff that changes people's thinking. It changes their hearts. And forcing them to do it through government is not going to have the same impact. And this is why the Democrats are killing us and trouncing us. It's not because they write better laws. It's because they've already convinced you from Hollywood that they're correct. You actually are willing to enslave yourself. Okay? That's how it works. That's how the Cultural Revolution works. Is they already enslave your mind first. And so you don't mind having a few laws changed later. You already believe you're in the position you're in now. And this all happens through the culture. So, again, this is something you can do something about.
I really liked when you said, what is the Lord telling you to write?
Yeah.
Because I think that's really powerful. Everyone has something that they are fired up about, and and I'm speaking from this Christian perspective. When we are fired up for a cause or for for a perspective, or we have a heart for people to know Christ.
Yeah.
That's the Lord putting that on our heart. That there's a verse that says, it's the Lord who puts His will in you to to act and to do the things that He desires. He gives you His desires.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you talking, I think it was last week, about how you said that verse about how the Lord makes a ready pen, and He even inspires you to write. Like He inspires you to do a lot of things like that.
Yeah. So I would say this is a big part of being a Christian, is agreeing with our new nature in Christ.
Yep.
And sometimes that means we are on fire for an issue or a topic, because God has given us that passion for it. And, we probably shouldn't shut that down.
Yeah, probably shouldn't.
But He can guide us in how to get the message out. He can give us, the words and the pictures to tell the message, tell the story.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, as I've mentioned a few times in the past, there's a lot of theories about, like the kind of films people should be making based upon, what you can do with that and the reach it might have. And people talk about genre studies and the kinds of genres you should be making and all this stuff. And sure, there's stuff to that to learn. There's stuff to help you to make your project successful. But mostly it's really more about what you were saying, which is about what is the Lord telling you and how can you make this effective, right? And so, we know, as a producer, we know a lot of ways you can monetize things. Merchandising is a big thing, like you could write a book and then make that into a script and then make that into a film, and you've got multiple avenues of, a lot of this stuff is great, but it's like, again, it's about the passion that you have as an artist to make something that's effective as a piece of art, as a piece of storytelling. It's affecting you as an artist, right? It's not just affecting your viewer. Like so you become an aficionado, right, of art. You know what good art is. And now you're making something that touches you as an artist. But you do have to know your audience. Who is your audience? Does your audience like action-packed stuff, or do they like drama? Again, this is something to know, right? It might inform your product, but it's not why you make the product, right? So you have to remember the cart that the cart and the horse, and what drives what. So you can't get too trapped and lost in these other matters. You have to move forward into what matters to you as an artist. Why you're an artist in the first place is not to make money. It's to speak to people about issues that matter. And especially as a Christian artist, right? So these things are about the passionate message that you have. Like in this case, we were talking about abolition a second ago, right? Like the passionate message you have about ending slavery. Why do we want to do that, right? Am I not a man and a brother? Right? So these passionate messages of love for brother, of love for your neighbor, is what needs to speak clearly through your message. And if you're not expressing that in your own life, how can you express it through your art? So these are things that artists really have to struggle with to get the right message. You know? And believe me, I'm not poo-pooing the way we handled slavery in the US compared to the UK entirely. I'm just saying that what we did wasn't as effective as what they did initially. Right? But there were people there, right? There was a lady who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? And I think it was Lincoln who said, "You basically started this war." Lady. It's like, thanks a lot. No, but the point was she stirred some hearts. She made people understand the importance of this message in America and spoke to people on a level that was human and relatable. And that, to me, is what they were doing with Sound of Freedom today. Right? So these are relatable messages. I wrote a tweet. Sometimes I mention my tweets and sometimes how terrible they are. But there's another one I wrote recently. Let me see if I can get it. It was actually about the Olympics. And I know that there's this discussion about, they mocked the Last Supper, right? That's true. I do care about that as well. But there was this other thing that I tweeted about, which is about this Italian lady boxer who just got beat down yesterday by this guy who calls himself a woman. And the tweet I put out was yesterday. It's the picture of the lady on the ground with her knees on the ground, and she's crying. And I had an inclination to go, wait a second. I don't know if this was the Holy Spirit or what it was. But I was remembering that there was another very infamous Olympics picture in my head. A picture of Olympics years gone by. 1936. I'm not that old. But I have Wikipedia. And I think I saw a documentary on this. But my tweet says this. Read up on the 1936 Olympics, friends. It was held in the fascist capital of Berlin. It featured fascists owning Jews and black folks. And less than 10 years later, a world war engulfed our globe and fascism was fully denounced by the world. There is hope, friends, but surviving this obstacle means we must go through it. So I was sharing this other tweet, and the person said about the picture in the tweet, they said she trained her whole life just to have her dreams ripped away by gender ideology. It's quite sad. It is sad. But in 1936, we were also dealing with a bunch of racist morons in Germany, right? Anti-Semites. We were dealing with these morons back then. So it's not like, these challenges just stop coming, friends. They just change their shape. They change their face. And so it could be in the next 10 years that some other terrible world war engulfs our world, and we have to face this social issue on a mass scale. Nobody knew that Hitler was going to attack Poland and all these things were going to happen. They just thought they could tolerate a bunch of fascist rhetoric for a while, right? And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to do something about it. So, you never know. It's 2024. It could be by 2035, 2034. This issue that we're seeing in the Olympics, this issue we're seeing around the world in the Western civilization, hopefully it will be defeated by then. But it might be a lot of pain and suffering in between now and then. But let me tell you, as an artist, as a Christian artist, there is hope. And the reason that we can have hope is because you can be involved in changing hearts and minds about these harmful ideologies when nobody else in the church knows what to do. All they know to do is love their neighbor in their church, give their tithe, give encouragement, right? Provide a meal for somebody. But they don't know what to do about this ideology. And you got to give them something to do, folks. You got to write a script and make something that's relevant to our modern issues and change hearts and minds. And if you do that in a way that can reach people, then people will throw money at you because they want this message to get out there. There's an in-demand message here that Hollywood won't talk about. They don't want to talk about it. It rocks the boat too much, right? And the sad thing is it rocks the boat in the church too sometimes. The church wants everybody to be nice and play nice, right? Don't offend anybody. We've talked about this before, but often it's just too much feminism in the church. They're not suited to conflict, right? They don't want a bunch of conflict. But Christ says, I come to bring a sword, right? And division between these folks and those folks. And so there's a real struggle going on in people's minds and people's hearts. And it's true that politics is downstream of culture, which means if you want to change the politics, you need to change the culture. But what's culture downstream of? It's downstream of your real, authentic values and beliefs about God, about morality, and all of these values form your culture from the ground up. And if you lose all those values, say goodbye to Western civilization. Remember, we talked about that last week. Civilization or catharsis. You want to have catharsis and feel good about yourself? And you're just going to keep going down that road? Well, goodbye to civilization. Right? Civilization takes order, law, reason, values, principles for it to operate. It doesn't take catharsis and your emotions. Okay? Those things will be gone next week. We don't need a bunch of drug users in office, right? Relying on their catharsis every 5 minutes to feel good. No, we don't need that. We need people with principles, values, right? Stuff that says they're going to be consistent with how they do things. So that's what, right? That's what creates your culture. So when you've got that built in to your stories and your myths from the ground up, all your laws are going to be better. All your laws are going to make much more sense. They're built on principles that don't just change. Because the society has decided what it values, right? This is why you see the story of Christ in so many of these myths and tales, because Christianity has deeply affected Western civilization. The hero often gives his life for the people in the film, and you're constantly seeing these superheroes making the sign of the cross. I mean, Spider-Man, he looks like he's on a cross as he's stretching his webs to save the train, and he's struggling and blood is dripping off of his nose, and the mask is being ripped off of his face. Why? Because the mask of Christ's divinity was being ripped off when he was on that cross. It's all symbolic. And so there's people who are watching Spider-Man who are like, I don't know why, but I got this thing about this guy who's going to give his life for us. Why do I have that? Why is that heroic to me? Gee, I wonder why. Actually, I don't. It's very obvious why. It's because we live in a Christ-haunted civilization, right? And here's the issue with that. We can be very proud of that, but at the same time, we have to understand that because we're Christ-haunted, if we don't do something about it, what does that mean? Our punishment is all the greater. Because we were told all day long, in all of our movies, and we got the Bible right in front of us. It's not being stripped away from us. We got the Gutenberg's press going all day. People handing out Bibles. This ain't China. No. We have no excuse. None whatsoever. To not live according to that gospel. So what are we going to do about it? Right? So I'm talking here mostly to the church. And I'm sorry, but our job is to offend people. Right? Our job is to remind people that we shouldn't feel so comfortable in the West. We have a whole history of knowing the truth. Enormous history of people fighting and dying for the truth. We have no excuse. Okay? So we need to pull up our bootstraps and say, I've got to make a difference in the world, and all I need is a little bit of help to do that. I'm going to be making this short movie. I'm going to be making this thing. I'm going to be growing it up into something bigger. Why? Because it's a message that we can all believe in. So what does that mean? You have to make that message loud and clear to people. And so it's not enough to, and it's not whatsoever a criticism of Sound of Freedom. For example, they made that film in the Hollywood studio system initially, right? And sure, it was on the shelf for a few years. Disney shelved it. But let's just say that Angel Studios has changed some things. And I'm saying let's just say because they have. Things are different now. Maybe you haven't seen it, maybe you don't know it, maybe you don't feel it, maybe you're not part of these things. Fine. I'm telling you right now, things have changed. And as a result of films like Sound of Freedom, you can make a difference. You can crowdfund a film. You can get together with your church and raise money. You can talk in your community about what matters. Rafa International has short films about human trafficking. People are making short movies, long movies about abortion. Stuff that matters, right? And they can hit the theaters now. Not as much as they used to, no. But now they're going to be able to reach a wider audience because people need to know this matters. They need to hear that these are issues we really care about. There's people who don't even believe abortion is an issue anymore. Like it's not in the public eye for them. They think that it's all been settled. It hasn't been all settled, friends. No. We have to eliminate this from our culture. It's brutal and disgusting. So, like abolition, right? We need to understand that these babies are human beings. And we have to stop pulling the plug on these innocent people. And so people are going to be needing to make more art about this. You've got to put it in people's faces. You really have to. It has to be in the public consciousness. I'm not saying you have to put bloodied, pictures in people's faces. No, it's about the idea of it, right? And it's about real people with real issues. There's real women who believe they don't have other options. And they also think it's all political, and it's not. It's not all political. It's about real people who need help. So, because that there's women, and I've talked to some of these women, who they won't go to people because they think that they'll be rejected because of their politics, right? Oh, they won't help me because of this or that. Well, you got to understand, what a Christian really believes is not about that. What a Christian really believes is about loving people. That's what we believe. So even if you don't want to hold on to this baby and keep it, that's okay. Somebody else does. And nobody's going to hold a grudge against you. All right? So, stories can solve a lot of this. Because, characters can live out a lot of these realities where just talking to someone won't make a difference, right? They're not going to listen to you in that way. But stories are things sometimes that break through a lot of these belief systems, right? They believe if this character on screen can do this, well, then I can do it. If this character on screen can be understanding of me, well then, or someone like me, then maybe other people can. So my belief is that the future of Christian film is made by bold people who care the way Christ tells us to care. Loving your neighbors yourself. And that means offending them. Being willing to offend them so that you're showing them true self-sacrificial love. You're able to speak about what that really means. And as an artist, that's saying it in a beautiful way. It's saying it with just a little extra aesthetic and pizzazz and meaning and something put into it, some real stuff put into it that comes from the heart. So, I believe that you can make a blockbuster anti-abortion film. If you work at it, I think that there will be other human trafficking films that also make a difference. And whether it's Angel Studios or whether it's, Lord TV or another outfit that's new that comes in, maybe there'll be other crowdfunding companies that come in and want to make a difference. Well, I think that this is just going to happen more and more, frankly. So, pastor, people in your church, try to find that artist who just isn't being listened to and doesn't believe they can make a difference. Tell them that they can make a difference, and you will help them. You will help them to make a difference. And if you do that, I think you'll be rewarded for that. So, all right, well, I could talk about technicals on that. I've talked about some technical things about how to shoot stuff, how to make stuff, how to distribute stuff, all of that. To me, this was more about being bold, being willing to hurt some feels of your neighbor, and know that it's these big social issues that are going to matter. Why? Because it's what Hollywood's not talking about. So you got to squeak in there the way Sound of Freedom did. And it's got to be made well, okay? Sound of Freedom was not made badly. It was made very well. It's made with Hollywood, money with Hollywood, producers. And so I'm not saying that just anybody can make anything, but I am saying that you can believe now that because of the success of Sound of Freedom, that there will be others. There will be others like Sound of Freedom who will also be working to do the same thing. And get involved in that. Make a difference in that way. So, any other last final thoughts, honey?
Get yourself a Substack page and write what's on your heart.
Yes. Yes. Very true. Yeah, and also build community, work on community in your church. Try to make something real, authentic. Talk about stuff that really matters. Have Bible studies. Talk about media, what makes good media, what makes good films, what makes them work, what makes them good, what makes them not as good, right? And if you keep having these honest conversations about this stuff, it's going to refine your work. It's just inevitable that it's going to refine it and make it better. But you can't just believe you're already good out of the box. Like, it's just not. Come on. Art is a craft. You have to work it. You have to keep refining it. So we can do this, guys. Stop doubting in yourself. If Christ has got your back, who can be against you? Right? Now's the time. All right, everybody. We love you. Where can people find you, Rebecca? On Substack?
Yes.
Yes.
You can find me on Substack, just under my name, Rebecca Croft. But you can also find me on YouTube at Rebecca Loves Jesus. Where can people find more about you, Jon?
Yes, thank you. Yes, you can find me on MediaMoses.com. You can find me here on X at Jon Edward Croft, or at the MediaMoses, or at the MediaMoses. You can find me at Culture Warfare with Jon Croft on YouTube and on Rumble and Locals. So thank you. Thanks for hearing me out. And stand up for the culture. We love you guys. And hopefully talk to you next week. And hopefully we'll have some surprises coming up soon.